Shalom. Let's look up. We're going to use Start Page right here. It's actually a better search engine because they don't keep your IP address and your personal information like Google, right? And if you want to keep a little anonymity, then try to use this more regularly. This right here is a service, is one of our service laptops right here. So you might see us go and use Google, and in fact this is the Google Chrome browser and everything. Once we restart and kind of uninstall this kind of information, then we'll be able to not just use Start Page more consistently. Hopefully they'll be able to update some of their Google has this particular kind of search thing, which is kind of interesting, especially when we're doing these particular type of laptop lectures, right? So here we're looking up Rabbi Matthews, Black Jews, right? To kind of narrow the search using those kind of keywords, and we see some information right here. Re-emerging Jews, Nigeria. I think there's some film, the Igbo Jews of Nigeria. There's the Reform. Okay, this is something else right here. Here's Wentworth, Author Matthew, Wikipedia page. Then there is the Jewish Virtual Library, the Black Jewish or Hebrew Israelite community. Right? In my Father's house, there are many mansions. So you might have met or know one particular kind of Hebrew or Israelite or Black Jew or Beta Israel. But it's important for us to know, well, how did it all start, especially this resurrection, this regeneration, should we say, the regeneration. It's very clear that Rabbi Matthews, he understood, right, that link with Ethiopia and that link with Kedamawi, Haile Selassie, with the conquering line of the tribe of Judah. Many of our black Hebrew Israelites today, the ghetto Israelites, the street preachers, the rest of them, as the Bible says, they are our enemies for the gospel's sake. When we speak about Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, there's enmity because there's ignorance, but because of the fathers. And when we're speaking about the fathers, these are who we're speaking about. Ones like Wentworth, Arthur, Matthew right here. So I don't know whether to go, let's just go to the Wikipedia page. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this this is the preview to be a Rebbe or not to be a Rebbe, because some would say if we utilize that particular title of a Rebbe, right, that we are going against Moshiach, what Moshiach said. So we have to get a little clarity on this particular matter. So even before getting into that, we want to deal with this right here. So here's a little bit of his story that's publicly, searchable, right, today, right? So you see some information here, very, very interesting. In fact, let's first get his picture. Let's scroll on his picture. Okay, there's no higher resolution. I think we do have a higher resolution actually elsewhere. But let's get his picture right here. In the first part, we were speaking about the book, The Black Jews of Harlem, by Howard M. Broats, right? By Howard M. Broats. So let's zoom this in. Now we're showing you some publicly available information that you can search and download and print out. It's only a page or two, right? It's a page or two, and what we want to do is go over this brother's story right here, Wentworth Arthur Matthew. Actually, his proper title will be Rabbi, right? Rabbi Wentworth Arthur Matthew. But due to the Jews who say they are Jews and have enmity to we, the Ethiopian Hebrews, they try to take away that identification, take away that rightful title. Now, some would say, well, even in Black Judaism, we cannot or we should not, have any rabbis because of what Yeshua HaMoshiach, what the Moshiach said, right? And we're going to get into clarity on that in a subsection called to be a Rebbe or not to be a Rebbe, right? So let's just put this right there, okay? All right, in the setup for the next part of this. But let's go through a brief story of Rabbi Wentworth, Arthur Matthew. So here we have when he was born. Now, it's interesting when he was born. If we take a look at the year that Rabbi Matthew was born. Now, remember, this is all filling in some of the gaps that we have in our story as Ethiopian Hebrews. So this is our thing. This is about us. Right? So we talk about Black History and Black History Month and so forth and so on. How come this aspect of Black history is not known by Black people? Doesn't mean they have to be Black Jews. If they choose not to be Ethiopian Hebrews, they can go on as Gentiles, or as African Americans or hyphenated Americans or colored or Negro or whatever like that. But shouldn't the truth, be told, the fullness of the history? Because if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it, or you're damned or condemned to repeat it, right? And this is what we've been going through as Black people, like the Israelites in the wilderness, round and round. Now, this is the book that we touched on in the first part, and we also duly noted, right, within the foreword, right? We duly noted in the foreword that it's 1964 right there, right? 1964 right there, and the preface is 1970 edition. Says this book deals with what a number of critics have pointed out are two virtually separate themes. But given the nature of the subject, a unity could not be forced or imposed upon it without doing an injustice to its concreteness and fullness. Interesting. I haven't heard too many writers use that word fullness. It's a very Rastafari sort of word to use, like the fullness. You understand? Not just half the story or a little bit here, or compartmentalization, but getting the full story. All right? So let us read a little bit more, and you look at our brother right there, our unsung hero, our unsung hero of his time and of his age. So this book is about a religious group, and this is based on Howard M. Broads' research and study. I think a European Jew, if I'm not incorrect. The book is about a religious group whose members claim to be Jews, but who at the same time do not deny an ethnic or racial affiliation to another group whom they regard as so-called Negroes. Now, let's remember who is writing the book. But even though Howard M. Broads has, he was biased, like many European Jews are biased by being taught, even as European Jews, half of the story. They only told half of the story concerning them, and they believe that many of them have been taught to believe that they are the only Jews and that Judaism comes from them, instead of the truth of the matter that they were converted, that they are converts to what is an Afro-Shemitic way of life, Afro-Shemitic. I like to use that phrase because Hebrew, if you know about linguistics, it's known as an Afro-Shemitic language. And the key word is that they call Hebrew Afro-Shemitic, right? Now, as such, their experience is bound to have implications both for the Jewish world and for the Black, Negro, or so-called Negro world, which are different and unrelated to each other. That's a lie. But this is the preface that's being given. This is how they're trying to either understand it or obfuscate Remember, this is 1960. This is 1970, actually, 1970, and by Howard M. Broads. But okay, that's his second preface because this is a 1970 edition. But there was an earlier edition from like 1963, and he seems to have updated some of what he was saying. But going on, he says, as for the first, there is almost nothing I can add to the details described within. For while I visit the group from time to time, distance has made impossible any kind of sustained contact. One development which I had been expecting to happen for some time has finally taken place. A small group of people originated from Chicago and numbering no more than 40 arrived at the Tel Aviv airport requesting admission as immigrant Jews. They came from Liberia, where they had lived for a while, but where they had not been happy. As one of the men stated in a television interview in Tel Aviv, quote, "It is difficult to be Jewish in Liberia," end quote. Isn't Liberia the place that Abraham Lincoln and other nice white people wanted to send the black people, like a colony, an American colony in a sense? So America, the Anglo-Europeans still have their hands on, so I can understand that they were not very happy there, right? Because liberty means liberty. Like, let us alone, let us be. You understand? Liberty is liberty. Freedom is freedom, right? You know? The Israeli authorities, after a certain amount of deliberation about the exact nature of their status, you see, this is still an issue that we have to wrestle with even right now, status. But once we know the truth, and we're willing to get up and stand up for I and I rights, I and I divine rights, I and I human rights, and under whatever constitutional system that provides us right to be, so be it. But they said the exact nature of their status sends them to a kibbutz, and one will be interested to learn how they fare. As to implications for the black world, which perhaps constitutes the fundamental thrust of this study, one can hardly fail to be struck by the fact that what was years ago an exotic theme at the margin of Negro society has become vocal opinion in the recent past. A whole generation of students now reject the identification, quote, Negro, end quote, insisting upon the term black, quote, black. Now, if you notice, let me see if I can show you this here. I saw this on the first page. You'll notice how Negro is caps right here, and black is not, right? Right. The same thing was done on the first page, which is kind of, and they still do this actually today, right? You know, like little g, big G kind of thing. You can see right here where black is lowercase, but Negro is caps. So this definitely shows that the Gentiles, right, or white supremacy, right, unconscious white supremacy, even among the liberals, still enforces that false paradigm, right, that false paradigm. I remember it's a spiritual warfare. This matrix you don't really so much see, you know, it's always not seeable with you always can't tell people about it. You have to see it yourself. And some aspects you can't even see. So when we might say black with a capital B. But when they say black and write black, they write black with a lowercase b, even to this day, right? And we've seen different when they write white, they write it in the capital W, right? But this all, right? This was all thought out 40 years ago by the black Jews, right? So it says this was all thought out 40 years ago by the black Jews and kindred groups who assert that the term Negro is a badge of slavery. The emphasis upon communal power, common unity power, furthermore, in the sense of communal achievements and solidarity, which is also a vocal theme today, was a persistent standpoint of these sects from the beginning. This is in no way to impute a direct causal connection between the revaluations of the sects and the later popularizations. It makes more sense to look at the sects as having articulated a response to a situation that, under the pressure of latent events, became more widely seen and felt. Essentially, this is the perception of the inadequacy or partial validity of, quote, integrationism, end quote, as a doctrinaire dogma. This much would seem to place the black Jews squarely in the camp of what is called black nationalism. So this is like 40 years ago. We have to recognize that some of these things are consistent today, and some of these things are somewhat nuanced in a different way today, right? I think this is going to be a long segment, so we're not going to be able to post this. I'm looking at the time right now in this one, so it'll be very important to just get the word out to those on Ethiopian World Net, those who can post this up to Ethiopian World Net, to Facebook and elsewhere. Please do. We're going to go on with this. So the point is that in January 1970, right, from Hamilton, Ontario, this is where Howard Broats, I guess, was originating from at the time, the general consensus of the wider world, right, this world system, this Gentile world system, is that the black Jews were squarely in the camp of black nationalism, right, of black nationalism from the 60s. Now, this is not exactly the case among certain camps of or sects of black Hebrews, Hebrew Israelites, Ethiopian Hebrews, black Jews. So some might choose to call themselves by one particular definition or definer or word, right, compound descriptive terminology, but still the fundamental basics of who we are, historically speaking, right, are consistent almost all across the board. And I think this is very important for those who are not a part of one particular camp or next one, right? But remember what the Moshiach said. He said, in my Father's house, there are many mansions, right? So we have the Beta Israel, the house of Israel. Many people, when they hear that, they think it just means the Ethiopian Jews of Ethiopia, the Falashas. They are the Falashas of the East. We are the Falashas of the West. And it's, I think, been agreed to by certain ones that they are perhaps of the tribe of Dan or the tribe of Dan, right? While Haile Selassie and other sectors of the Ethiopian people, right, are of the tribe of Judah or of the monarchy, right? King David's house. So we have to understand that there's Judah at home, right, speaking of the monarchy and the royal house of David, and there is Judah in the diaspora, speaking of the so-called Negro, right, the so-called Negro or the black American. Then we have the Benjamites, we have the West Indian, we have what some have termed the Benjamites, and then Haiti with the Levites. Now, some extend it to other regions, right, other parts of South America, and it is true. There's granny in the closet. This is known among the Hispanic brothers and sisters that there's a black granny that's in the closet. So there's even a link amongst those populations. So when we say like the Mexicans are Issachar or Issachar or certain ones might look and say, well, no, they're not black on the outer level, but there's a granny in the closet. We have to recognize what has been done, the miscegenation that has been done to the peoples, all right? But anyway, this is about black nationalism. That's what they was calling it in 1970s. Reading on, yet a doctrinaire separatism, or a doctrine of separatism, so commonly regarded as intrinsic to this nationalism, is not a feature of this group. So of this group, where amongst many other black Jews, there was more of a nationalistic sort of a level. The writer here is saying among Wentworth author Matthew, Rabbi Matthew's community, this was not so. Right? This was not so, is what he is saying from his study and observation. It was not a feature of this group. They have a communal life centered around their distinctive religious worship. So the center of Rabbi Mateos' group, the center of it, the central aspect of it, was the religious worship, or we can say the Hebrew, Ethiopian Hebrew, the spirituality, right, was the center of that particular group, not the black nationalism that was more common among other black Jewish groups in the 1960s, before and even after, and even some of them even today. But their separatism does not go beyond this, which is the normal attribute for any self-sustaining group. So it's interesting the observations that are given, because we must learn from this, right? We must learn from this. We're learning how we got here and what is the real root. So when we talk about Rastafari, when we talk about the Torah, the Shabbat, and the Ethiopian Hebrews and the connection with Haile Selassie, and we as Rastafari Hebrews, Ethiopian Hebrews, it's very important to recognize we're not pulling this out of the air, out of thin air or something like that, you know? But it's based on our hidden or suppressed history, the half of the story that has not been told until now. So the separatism did not go beyond that, which was a normal attribute of any self-sustaining group. They have numerous white visitors and friends. In fact, one may see in all this an inwardly orientated nationalism. And so the nationalism wasn't orientated outward as maybe other groups, but it was more an inner nationalism, right? Pointing to the eternal significance of two principles that produce dignity and contentment. Let me just repeat this, right? It said that they have numerous white visitors and friends, right? In fact, one may see in all this an inwardly orientated, so their orientation, inwardly orientated nationalism, pointing to the eternal significance of two principles that produce what? Dignity and contentment. See, there's not a lot of contentment in some of our Project Israelite and Street Corner Israelites. It's not really. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of pain, a lot of truth as well, based on what the people have experienced. But what we need is a proper orientation. That's why it says, look to the east for the crown, with that, well, black man will be crowned, right? Look to the east, and that's the aspect they deny. They deny the Haile Selassie connection. They deny the line of Judah, Ethiopia connection. And they deny I as Rastafari. Those particular sects, modern sects of the black Hebrew Israelites, right? The first is the refusal to run away from oneself. Keep running and running away, but you can't run away from yourself. So the first is the refusal to run away from oneself, which is implied in raising the question of who we are rather than in the answers to it. In other words, keep raising the question of who are we as a people, and what does Yahweh Baruch Hu, what does Jah say about who we are? We're Jah's people. So who is that? What does that mean to us? And not just seeking to just give answers, simple answers to it, but make the answer the living reality. The second is self-help. And I point to this often, brothers and sisters, and in this society of His Imperial Majesty, line of Judah society, Brother Yad, and I point to this because this should be an example for us, right? This foundation should be not just historical, right? It's not just historical data, but it's actionable data. So the second is self-help. directed toward a decent life as the most solid basis of independence, a decent life, right? This is interesting because I didn't just following the Holy Spirit here, the Ruach HaKodesh here, the Menfes Kedus, and in let's see if I can bring this up right here, because in doing this preview to a Rebbe, to be a Rebbe or not to be a Rebbe. In other words, whether this title should be used amongst us and whether I should use this particular title, right? And I've kind of wrestled over it. You understand? Some have already referred to I in this capacity as that, and others have another opinion. So what's the truth about that? That's what I'm actually meditating on and been meditating on, and originally I came to this particular recording to record on that. But when I started, the Holy Spirit said, touch on the black Jews of Harlem and Rebbe and Mateos, Rabbi Matthew, and here we are. But I had pulled this up previously. I looked up the word decently and order. Decently and order, right? And it occurs one time, right? In 1 Corinthians 14 and 40, where our New Testament black Hebrew Rebbe, well, he didn't use the term, but he was on the level of, we speak about Paul, Hawadi up Aulos, right? Paul, right? Where Paul says right here, right? Paul on a certain level was like Burhana Selassie, like Bob Marley on a certain level, right? I don't know if you can understand in the context that I'm saying that, Yehovah's, because not so much to Israel on that level, or just to black people, but to the blacks in diaspora, right, and to the righteous among the Gentiles. All right? It says, let all things be done decently, right, and in order. Now, this is, if you understand the Hebraic, the Judaism in its real Afro-Shemitic or black African Ethiopian roots, you will understand how this particular statement could not be uttered by anyone other than one who is heavily influenced by ancient Judaism, right, or black Judaism, Afro-Shemitic Judaism. We're speaking about Hawadiyah Alos. He's saying, let all things be done decently, right, and in order. This is a key chapter right here, 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and 40. All right? So in bringing that to the forefront, we'll go into some of the detail of it, but when I just came across this particular verse, this line right here where it says the second of these two principles that produce dignity and contentment, right? The second of these two is self-help, self-sufficiency, do for self, is self-determination. We might talk about what we went through in the 400 plus years of enslavement, but we recognize that it was our fault, right? We recognize that it was a divine dispensation, right? This does not mean that the Slav massa did not do wickedness and is not to be judged for that. But this is not about white guilt. Some folks think we talk about slavery and what they did to black people. No, it's not for white guilt. No, it's for us to digest the reality, right? To do for self. The second is self-help. In other words, it's like either we can get with this or we can get with that. You see, when we turn our backs on Yahweh as a people, right? When we turn our backs on our own way of life, we began to worship even other tribes, like African tribes, heathenistic and paganistic non-Hebraic tribes, right, in Africa. And it's the same process that's going on even today with black people, right, even in the Obamaism on a certain level. But the second is self-help. But it's interesting, speaking about Obama, his wife, Michelle, I think her cousin, or a cousin of hers, is actually a black Jew, a Hebrew, and he comes out of, though he's become more, in a sense, liberal in his views or whatnot like that, but he comes out of Rabbi Matthew's community, the same black Jews of Harlem. So we can say that on Michelle's side of the family, you know, there are folks who know that what we're saying here is the truth. It might be a little bit radical. It might be a little bit fiery. You understand? But in Judaism and among our people, even among the Jews, there are different groups. You understand? But that's the right of them as free people to express their views, you know, freedom of speech and freedom of conscience and freedom of association. These are all rights that they tell us as human rights, but firstly and foremostly, they are divine rights. You know what I mean? And the human rights only recognize what our divine rights, but just them written down on a piece of paper can't do anything if they're not in our head and our hearts and in our hands and in our work, and we're not willing to defend, right? Get up, stand up, protect and defend our rights, and to fight if necessary, because we are confident in the victory of good over evil. So the second is self-help, directed toward a decent life. Let all things be done decently and in order, as the most solid basis, the most solid rock of independence. I'm just thinking about the earlier Torah portion where in this RSS 21 for Ki Tissa, where we touched on, I think it was Isaiah chapter 8, where it says, and he shall be for a sanctuary. You understand? That building of that sanctuary, the principle and the example that Rabbi Matthews demonstrated, right? Preached, demonstrated, and even he prophesied. There's a prophecy that he has made in alignment with the Torah and the scriptures that's important for us 40 years later. So on the black Hebrew Israelite, Ethiopian Hebrew, and elect Rastafari level, Rabbi Matthews would be on a certain level a black Moses, if you can receive it. He's that type of Moses on that level, right? Even though he did not see the people go into the promised land, it's his foundation, right? Or it is him who is like the father of the black Hebrews, black Jews, Hebrew Israelites, Rastafari, Ethiopian Hebrews consciousness on that particular level, right? And I think that it's important that we recognize our elders, our patriarchs, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, which is the Torah. So, with that being said, let us go forward, right? One more paragraph. Now, black or Negro opinion in the United States is in something of a crisis because, among other reasons, ain't that something? More than 40 years ago. Actually, that would have been 30, a little bit like 30, 43 years ago. No, that would, yeah, roughly, like 40 years ago. Ain't that something? They were saying that black or Negro opinion in the United States is in something of a crisis. Well, what's new? Because, among other reasons, it has gone as far as it can on the old premises, which it adapted and shaped in the struggle for civil rights. Now, this is written in 1970, and they were saying that. And now we would go through another period of time with a lot of misleaders like the sons, Korah, Korah's rebellion, in a sense, leading the black people still in this civil rights and this dreamlike state, not waking them up, not helping them to get up and stand up and fight for their rights. But here we have an author actually stating that the black or the Negro opinion in the United States circa 1970 was in something of a crisis because, among other reasons, it has gone as far as it can on the old premises, which it adapted and shaped in the struggle for civil rights, where it is going from now on is thus of the keenest interest. It is unlikely that conversion to Judaism or Islam will be an option pursued by many people. I mean, to their own damnation. I mean, we can see the results now, 40 years later, right? If this is the way the sects have normalized their blackness to themselves, it must remain their private and sectarian concern. What is true of this is also true of the attempt to project a black culture as contrasted with reflection about black experience, which is in some respects different from, and in other respects exactly like, that of other people and groups. What is, however, not at all sectarian is the degree to which these sects have perceived the general foundations of self-respect underlying any people. Now, you know, brothers and sisters who've been studying with I and I, that ras means head, but it also means self. Right? Ras means head as well as it means self, and teferi means respect, or one to be reverenced or respect, but in a Hebraic sense it's tiferet. It's a tiferet sephirot. The sephir known as tiferet is the Hebraic root of teferi, or the Hebraic teferi. So we have, but in the Amharic, ras teferi can be interpreted to mean the head to be reverenced, and it can also be interpreted at one and the same time as self-respect. So a Rebbe, to be a Rebbe or not to be a Rebbe? This is the question. What is, however, not at all sectarian is the degree to which these sects have perceived the general foundations of self-respect underlying any people. So any people that will be a people and will be sustainable as a people must have self-respect, right, as a general foundation beneath their feet, so to speak. It is in this light that they become a suggestion for the future, which is closer to the present than it was a half dozen years ago. Now, that was the end of Howard Broads's preface to the 1970 edition. Now, there's one more small part right here, which is his second part, where he wrote this firstly in 1963 in Northampton, Massachusetts. He says, my interest in the black Jews began with a study of this group that I made when I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago. And then he goes through an acknowledgement of different ones who helped and assisted him. I'll skip over that right now, and I'll go to where he says, finally, it is with much pleasure that I make the long overdue acknowledgement of the very great debt I owe Rabbi Wentworth A. Matthew, the leader of the Commandment Keepers congregation, who gave most generously of his time, right? Who gave most generously of his time, his hospitality, and who became a good friend. Without his many kindnesses, this study could never have been made, although it is always perplexing to be held up to a sociological magnifying glass, where everything that one does and says is being observed. Well, Howard Broads, I don't know if he's still living, maybe not, but, you know, just welcome to being black, so-called, or Negro in America. That's an interesting observation that he made, although it is always perplexing to be held up to a sociological magnifying glass where everything that one does and says is being observed. I should like to take this occasion to clear up the one real misunderstanding that may arise. This is that it has been impossible for me to follow Rabbi Matthew's usage regarding the word Negro. To this, however, I would say to him that whenever I use the term Negro, now this is Howard Broach. I'm gonna have to probably do a little search and just get a picture of him so we can, Howard Broach, who wrote this particular, this particular book right here. Let's get 300. 300 might do better. There we go. All right, get 300. Here we go. Yeah. This is interesting because he's saying right here, here's what Howard Broach, and that's one thing I caught when I mentioned black, lowercase, Negro, uppercase. He says he wanted to clear up something, right, in his 1963 acknowledgments, the acknowledgment Howard Broach wrote to this particular book right here in 1963, right, The Black Jews of Harlem. He says, where are we? He said, I should like to take this occasion to clear up the one real misunderstanding that may arise. And this is still a misunderstanding to this very day, in this ministry and in this teaching. And I, Brother Yadinos Ras Iadonis Tafar, I've been going over this for a while, and it seems like a few people will get it, but really with so many of those who have gone before us, like Rabbi, straighten that out, yeah, like Rabbi Matthews, you know what I'm saying? With ones like him who has gone before us, when we say Ethiopian Hebrew, this should be better understood by more folks. And so when I'm reading Howard Broach's acknowledgement and one real misunderstanding that may arise, and this misunderstanding has arisen and it must be torn down, right? And let's just hear what he says right here. He says, this is that it has been impossible for Howard Broach, to follow Rabbi Matthew's usage of the word Negro. To this, however, I would say to him that whenever I use the term Negro, in other words, whenever Howard Broach uses the term Negro in his book, The Black Jews of Harlem, it means almost, if not quite, what he means by Ethiopian Hebrew. I think this in itself is a very big point, right? This in itself, because had he used the word Ethiopian Hebrew instead of using the word Negro so much, right? Because a product of your time and of your class, he's of the intellectual class as a Jewish or a European writer and scholar. And although, it's like when we as black people say something, because they have a bias, an unconscious white supremacist kind of bias, because they never have confronted it. They can't really understand, what it is until they go through a little something, like certain ones who think that, like, say, Obama administration is trying to enslave them, and those who really see it like that. And you see them start to, like the Tea Party, start to do like, protest, boycott, civil disobedience, walk around with placards, and kind of say the same things that we went through 40 years ago when we were doing that. They were saying everything is all right for you, nigga. You know what I'm saying? So there's this bias there. I want to touch on this in dealing with so-called white Jesus versus the true Yeshua or the black Jesus, right? Concept that we as black people, we already been there, done that with white Jesus. We already done that. We already been there. And many of our ancestors, many of our people really sincerely tried to make themselves believe that Jesus was white. And it wasn't so much that we got to see, in a sense, you know, the real Jesus or the real Yeshua of 2,000 years ago, the thing that convinced most of us was the goddamn hypocrisy of white people. You know, you know what I mean? That Jesus is white, and yet you don't want us to read the Bible. The more we read the Bible, and you're supposed to be the foremost white Christian. God is white, Jesus is white, Santa Claus and snow is white, and yet you don't live up to what you claim when we get to read and know the truth for ourselves. And that's what broke us from it. See, white folks think that many of us have rejected so-called the whitewashed Jesus and all of that mythology, all that nonsense, all that lie. We reject Antichrist, Caesar Borgias, just because of some hatred. You know, like we just hate white people. See, that's how they view it. But they don't recognize what we have really gone through. They haven't put themselves, in a sense, in our shoes. You see what I'm saying? So when they now reject the black Jesus or the idea that Jesus is black, it is really from a subconscious and unconscious on the behalf of some. But some is very conscious, right? But of their leadership, right? You know, those who lead the Europeans, the secret society, globalists, the bankers, because they are the leaders of the European. This whole world system is a Gentile, white, Western world system. Biblically, scripturally, historically, you can see it like that. They might try to say, well, there was bad people in all cultures and everything. That's just rationalization. You know, that's a relativity kind of argument. That's a way of escaping, you know, looking at the truth face to face and facing up to it, right? And admitting. If they did so, you know, folks think that we talk about these things for white guilt. You know, like white guilt can't do nothing for us. In fact, it's done more against us than anything else. You understand? If anything, there needs to be, white people need to repent. I mean, seriously. You know, but that's between them and God, the true God, or them and their God. You know what I mean? But this point that Howard Broats makes, where he says about the term Negro. So when we're reading this, it's important for us to understand that this was very conscious in Howard Broats' mind, and he probably knew, no doubt, when Rabbi Matthews read the book, you know, there would be a misunderstanding. Like, I told this white boy or Jew, you know, I told Howard Broats, we're Ethiopian Hebrews, and he keep using this Negro, nigga, and now they want to know, well, why can't we say the N-word? And therefore, because they can't say the N-word, or they can't say it without some sort of consequence, that's not fair. We all should be. You see, there's a psychological, there's a soul, you know, there's some soul situation. You know, they got a psychological problem, right? And anyway, that's a little rant right there. You know, that's a little rant on that right there. So we're going to deal with a little bit more of this as we go forward, my brothers and sisters. In fact, I did say I was going to touch on this page right here, right? I don't know, how much time do we have? What's the time check? All right, well, maybe let's do just a fullness of this, you know, for those who, you know, might not have the opportunity of getting to the internet, and whether this might be played in the audio and on the radio or some of the blog talk type of radios, then, you know, one can hear this. So we're still within the hour. Okay, we're still within the hour. Let's see if we can get through this right here. So we're looking at the Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia for those who will be hearing this and not able to see this. I'll try to describe it right here. So we're looking at a picture of Rabbi Matthews, Rabbi Mateos from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Wentworth Arthur Matthew, they have right here, June 23rd, 1892. Very significant. These years are so significant. To December 1973 was the founder of the Commandment Keepers. And there's a link to the Commandment Keepers. According to Matthew, he was born in Lagos, Nigeria, although others say he was born in St. Kitts. In his 1927 petition for naturalization, Rabbi Matthew lists his place of birth as Spooner's Village, British West Indies. When he registered with Selective Service during World War II in 1942, he lists his birthplace as St. Christopher, British West Indies. Matthew, Rabbi Matthew, he married his wife, Florence, and her date of birth, August 29th, 1893 to July 1980. Wow. Who was also from the British West Indies. This union produced at least 4 children who were as follows. There was Arthur, Florence, Samuel E., and Joseph. It appears that only perhaps Joseph and Florence might still be alive. That's interesting. Wow. I got to look this up for a moment because it appears, okay, Arthur is July 12th, 1917, and he died, it says, June 1987. Then Florence was born March 25th, 1920. There's not a date of decease or death for Florence. The second, I guess, a daughter, right? Then Samuel E. was born February 20th, 1923, and also died in June 1987, while Joseph was born in August 24th, 1926, and there's no list of any date of death. So we have to look into that, and any of you all are free to look into that and update us about it, post something, and we'll put that forward, on one of the blogs or channels, or even on the Ethiopian World net on the Facebooks. In fact, there's some, I don't want to talk about it prematurely, but may Yah bring it to pass, and we'll be able to, share more of our information in one space, in the clouds, as it were. In 1919, Matthew founded the Commandment Keepers Congregation in Harlem. He was heavily influenced by, it says, the white Jews he met. I mean, whatever that means, but let's go on. And when he learned about the Beta Israel, he began to identify with them. Rabbi Matthew trained rabbis. You notice they don't put rabbi in this particular article, so it depends on who has put up this free encyclopedia. So more of us need to get our hands, on books like this, so we can update. Like when you want to update something here, they're gonna want source, source the information. So books like this and other books, as well as Dr. Ben's We the Black Jews, could also be referenced, to clarify some of this this subtle, this subtle, this subliminal, because they say he trained rabbis, but they don't want to put rabbi on his name. Rabbi Matthew trained rabbis who set up synagogues throughout the United States and the Caribbean. And as we mentioned already, Michelle Obama, her, I think, cousin, Funaye Capers, is also one of those who comes out, who kind of come out of that particular, he's kind of a fruit, you can say, of that particular planting on a certain level, right? So, So we, the black Jews, even goes up into the, you could say, the White House, as it is called. So Rabbi Matthew, he trained rabbis, black rabbis, who set up synagogues, Ethiopian Hebrew synagogues, throughout the United States and the Caribbean. When interviewed, many of the older members of this community recall memories of their parents observing Jewish dietary laws. In other words, even from before Rabbi Matthew did what he did, we were already in that way. You understand? There were some things that we thought they were African, kind of old, white man trying to make seem like old witch doctor, voodoo or hoodoo stuff. And then when we associate it with certain white Jews or European Jews and start to study for ourselves, we began to find out that actually these things were Hebraic, right? These things were Hebraic, and yet we didn't have any Torah or whatnot like that because, of course, it's like why the Falashas, when they took the Falashas lately, you know, they didn't have their own scrolls because the Ashkenazi and others stole them from, and they took them from them. Let's say it as it is. They stole it, right? And then they gave them the European Jewish things while they're studying it. That's why you keep seeing them write new things. We're discovering something new in the Torah code. Yeah, okay. Really. Anyway, when interviewed, many of the older members of this community recall memories of their parents observing Jewish dietary laws such as abstaining from pork or salting their meat. The group was heavily influenced by the philosophy of Marcus Garvey. You see, I'm not saying that the group was not influenced by Marcus Garvey, but if you read this for yourself, he says himself in the own quotation, Howard Broad's quoting Rabbi Matthew, he says himself that he was influenced by the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Kedemawi Haile Selassie, because he is that king of Israel upon the throne of David, which descends from Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, so forth and so on, 3,000 to 3,600 year old legacy right there. But anyway, this is a point that could be inserted as well. So we need to get to work, brothers and sisters, right? The group was heavily influenced by the philosophy of Marcus Garvey and his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA. Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford was the composer of the UNIA's Universal Ethiopian Anthem and its hymnal. Well, I'm very happy that that is getting out there, because a lot of people have said that, oh, Marcus Garvey, he wrote it and such, but actually the truth of it is that an Ethiopian Hebrew or black Jew, right, one of the black Jews of Harlem, we could say African-American, Israelite in a sense, is the one who composed the UNIA's Universal Ethiopian Anthem, Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where the gods, or Elohim, love to be, and its hymnal. He also led the UNIA's band and conducted its choir. But if you want to go on, but this might be on his page, that he basically broke from it when Garvey became double-minded about his majesty, almost like John the Baptist, when Garvey lost his head. If he's John the Baptist, that's when he lost his head. And this is when Arnold Josiah Ford and others basically let Garvey go his own Catholic way. It's like he kind of went backwards in a sense, but he did a lot of good things, and there's a lot of promise and hope if he did it indecently and in order, right, and recognized the King of Kings. Rabbi Matthew believed black Jews were the original Jews, and white Jews were the descendants of the Khazars or the Khazars, the Khazars. I mean, that now has been proven. You have to remember that when Rabbi Matthew said it, there wasn't a lot of research that was available in European and academic circles. Now there has been, like Koister's book, The 13th Tribe, and other works like that, who had kept and preserved Judaism. But the faithful among the Khazars, or the converted European Jews, he does give credit where credit is due. Rabbi Matthew, however, eventually concluded black Jews would not be accepted by the white Jewish community. And he kind of concluded correctly. Would not be accepted in a really, when we say equal, a free, a liberated status. And we see this even today with them putting African migrants and Africans in concentration camps in the state of Israel today, being paid, unfortunately, by many of our stolen tax dollars. Right? Now, Rabbi Matthew's congregation followed traditional Jewish law, the Torah, and the Halakha, and the Haggadah, and men and women were seated separately. Standard Jewish, Orthodox Jewish prayer books were used, but this is also done in Ethiopia as well, because the Judeo-Christian Foundation, Ethiopian Hebrews, were used, and the laws concerning Shabbat and Kashrut were observed. Wentworth Matthew, really Rabbi Matthew's teachings are followed today by many black Hebrew Israelites, and there's another link to that page, right, as well. Rabbi Matthew believed that blacks who convert to Judaism were not converting, but rather returning to Judaism. That's right. Like the Bible says that if the wild olive tree, in the New Testament, Hawadia Paulos says that if the wild olive tree could be grafted into the natural olive tree and the natural branch is broken off, then the wild olives should not boast itself, because it can be broken off, and the natural branches, no doubt, can be grafted in again. And this is what we're seeing presently. This is what we are. This is what time it is. Rabbi Matthew, he applied and was rejected twice to become a member of the New York Board of Rabbis. Well, that's no wonder. That's just another proof of white supremacist racism and the conspiracy, or Revelation chapter 2, verse 9. We're working towards Revelation chapter 3, verse 9. After his death in 1973, his Jewish orientation was taken on to, I think, another extreme, but so it was, by Capers Fournier. That's Obama, Michelle Obama's, I think, cousin or relative, right? Who is now a rabbi at Beth Shalom B'nai Zaken Ethiopian Hebrew congregation in Chicago, which he founded in 1985, right? So is the reason why they do not put rabbi on there because but they have rabbi here. You see Rabbi Wentworth, Arthur Matthew, holding a Torah scroll, right? But we give him that honor, and we're going to deal with the next part, to be rabbi or not to be rabbi. In fact, we might even call this will be a part of that series there as well. All right, we're a little bit over on time right now. We've gone a full hour or so, and this is a basic summary on Rabbi Matthew's, like a livication. I think it's important for the brothers and sisters to really know who's who, right, in the Ethiopian Hebrew movement, and what they did, and what is the foundation of our true way of life. And once again, pointing to this book right here, The Black Jews of Harlem, there's much more in it, even the teachings of the commandment keepers. Now, what Capers Fournier did, we can't just broadly comment on it right now, but generally speaking, a lot of us as black people, there's still that. We have to recognize if you don't understand white supremacy, then everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. You know what I mean? On that particular level, right? But there are others, such as ourselves, who hold to the fullness of what Rabbi Wentworth Arthur Matthew proclaimed, and what he said over time was just proven more and more to be the truth, right? It was proven to be the truth as time went on. So no doubt other things that he said as well will be proven by and by. So anyway, my brothers and sisters, Shabbat Shalom, Senbet Salam. This is Wyndham Yadon, reporting for the Lion of Judah Society of His Imperial Majesty. You can visit us on the web at ljsociety.org. If you want to getting started, you can go to the Resource Center. You can just check out our website, and just look around there. If you want to get some of the Torah, the Torah portions to study along, Shabbat studies and home studies as well, you can go to lionofjudassociety.info as well, and there's free downloads at both sites as well. And please subscribe here. Tell a friend or family, one who's willing or interested about what we're doing here. You may be feel free to download this video and share it with others. So, once again, Shalom Ras Teferi.